One. Welcome to another episode of Mississippi Stories here on Mississippi Today. I'm your host, Marshall Ramsey, editor at large. And our guest today is somebody that if you've been around Mississippi for a while, you probably know him, but you probably don't know everything about him. And he does a lot of great things. And I'm very fortunate to call him a friend. Robert St. John's on with us. And I'm going to read your bio. So that'll take about half the time that we're going to be talking because there's a lot here. But I don't want people missing out on all the great stuff that you do. Robert St. John has spent almost 4 decades in the restaurant business. 32 of those years, you got to be kidding me, 32? I know it. Would you start when you were
I'm in my 33rd, actually. So.
Yeah, 33rd. You're like me. My bio, I update it every 10 years, so sometimes on there. But anyway, you've been the owner of Crescent City Grill, Mahogany Bar, Tabella, Ed's Burger Joint, the Midtowner, and the new one, El Rayo Tex-Mex in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. St. John's a restaurateur, a chef, columnist, and author, and I've been very privileged to work with him on one of his books, and that was a lot of fun. For over 20 years, he's written an excellent weekly syndicated newspaper column. Named as the state's top chef 3 consecutive years and was honored as a Mississippi Restaurateur of the Year. St. John's an author of 11 books, including 4 collaborations with the ever amazing Wyatt Waters, who's of course a watercolorist and a good friend with Robert as well. Their book, An Italian Palette, was written in Europe while St. John and his wife and his 2 children traveled through 72 cities, 17 countries, 2 continents for 6 months. That was an amazing trip. I remember when y'all went on that. His 11th book, A Mississippi Palettes, another collaboration with Waters, was released in 2018. He's also a creator, producer, and co-host of the public broadcasting series Palette to Palette with Robert St. John and Wyatt Waters, and you're going to be soon filming, I guess, your 5th season. Kind of weird with COVID because I know my show's been kind of on hiatus too. It's just trying to get studio time and everything else. You're the creator, producer. I've already done that. And I think this is really honestly, and this is one I'm going to dive into deep right off the bat. In 2009, which I can't believe it's been that long now, he was the founder of Extra Table, a statewide nonprofit organization that ships over 20 tons of healthy food to over 50 Mississippi soup kitchens and mission pantries every month, which I've known you a long time. I think that was a turning point. It seems like when you did that, it seems like everything took off at that point. But you're also the winner of a Give Award this year, which I can't wait to dive into too. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's a huge honor. He's a founding member of the National Board of the Independent Restaurant Coalition, serves on the boards of the Mississippi Alzheimer's Association, Special Olympics of Mississippi, the Mississippi Book Festival coming back August 21st this year. Honestly, a crown jewel in Mississippi. Hattiesburg Forest County Public Library, and is founder of the Hattiesburg 100, an organization that assists sworn law enforcement and first responders families in their times of needs. He's also the founder of the Midtown Merchants Association in Hattiesburg. He and his wife, Jill, have 2 children, which grew up way too fast, and you do not sleep, because that right there is amazing that you can get all that done in a 24-hour period. Robert, welcome.
Good to be with you, my friend. I get bored easily. I think that's my problem.
It sounds like a pretty good problem to have, to be honest with you. It seems to be working with you. Unpack the Give Award. Let's talk about that just for a second. I was lucky enough to get one in 2012. I'm not sure why, but I know why you got it and why the organization got it, because y'all did a lot of incredible work this year helping people that were hungry because of the pandemic.
Yeah, so Extra Table is a nonprofit that I founded, like you said, back in 2009. Has really ramped up in the last 3 years. We brought in a lady named Martha Allen, who's our executive director, a few years ago, and she is just truly a force of nature. And what I'm about to tell you, the statistics I'm about to give you are really, we ran this statewide charity with 1 paid employee for half of the year in 2020, and about halfway through the year we added 1 more. So it's really 1.5 employee for 2020, and we shipped, well, let me put it in perspective a little bit. Our biggest year to date, 2019, we shipped, I think it was somewhere like 168,000 pounds of food to a couple of dozen mission pantries and soup kitchens across the state. So about 168,000 pounds of food. In 2020, during COVID, we ended up shipping 5.9 million pounds of food to over 60 different agencies from the coast all the way up. And Martha and Rhonda Hayden, who is our programs director, and an army of volunteers are responsible for that. We have a lot of great partners around the state. Good Samaritan, the folks at Good Sam have been awesome, and we partnered up with them on a lot of stuff. And child purchasing, Cisco, there are a lot of people that made that happen. We partnered up with different milk suppliers, Sanderson Farms, all sorts of people. So that is what the governor was kind of recognizing that effort, I guess, during COVID, to make sure. I mean, there was a point there that we had Breadlines basically when people were out of work, before all the government assistance came, and it was kind of modern day Breadlines. You see those Depression era photos of the men standing in line, the black and white photos on the street. They had a line of cars outside of soup kitchens and mission pantries in Mississippi, and it was just Martha, Rhonda, and all those volunteers did a great job. And so, that was yesterday. The ceremony at the governor's mansion was yesterday for the Give Award, and we were honored to have been a part. But we're just doing what we set out to do. Really, that's our mission, is to try to we want to get into every county before this thing's over with. So.
Well, it's such a brilliant concept, and it's one of those where when you proposed it and you started it, you're kind of thinking, why hasn't somebody done this before? Because a lot of times soup kitchens, they'll like run to the local grocery store and buy foods, so they're literally buying it at retail with the markup. And what y'all do is you're able to go in with the suppliers and be able to get stuff for wholesale and literally, not double, but pretty close to that, the amount of food that they're able to buy for their dollar.
Yeah, and since then we've even changed the model even more to where we're now buying truckloads from suppliers.
Oh, that's
from
awesome.
Actual manufacturers,
yeah.
And shipping it in and storing it. And the model over the years has kind of organically grown into something that's become more effective and more effective and more effective. And that's how we were able to get all of that food out in 2020 and still rolling today. I think it was over 200,000 pounds we shipped just in January this year, which was the full year, 2 years ago. So,
yeah. You talk about those Breadlines, and I mean, you were right there in the middle of it because everything hit so fast. And I remember about halfway through March, our office shut down and I was taken off the road, and suddenly, but I mean, a lot of businesses suddenly, they had to decide, well, we're gonna have to lay everybody off just to be able to stay alive. And I know you were in that same situation. I remember interviewing you, and you were sitting there struggling over doing, unemployment and making sure everybody was going to be taken care of and so forth. So, it wasn't a surprise that we had those Breadlines, and it is. I mean, I'm glad that y'all were able to react and be able to pivot that fast, not only with Extra Table, but also in your business as well.
Yeah, that for somebody in the restaurant business, it's the most challenging time ever in the history of the restaurant business to be in the restaurant business. And so, we just, you do what you have to do in those type situations. And our first and foremost goal was to make sure, until we had 300 people on the payroll at that time in March of last year when that hit. And that was my number one goal. We got to take care of all of those people, make sure they're healthy, make sure they're getting what they need. And so we filed a mass unemployment claim on behalf of all of them to make sure, that kind of got ramped up. And then different restaurants in the group were in different stages of, open and close. Some of them closed for 4 months. Some of them, we had one, Tabella, our Italian restaurant, stayed open pretty much through the whole thing, just did a lot of carry out for an extended period there.
Yeah, you were able to. I mean, I think the Midtowner had to close for a little while, didn't it? On that
4
one.
months, yeah. 4 months.
It was one, and then of course, your baby, the one that you started with, was the Purple Parrot, and it had to close altogether because obviously it's a fine dining restaurant, and you're probably not going to want to get fine dining food and takeout. I mean, the model worked, but there turned out to be a silver lining to that with you being able to repurpose the space.
Yeah, so Purple Parrot was the first restaurant I opened in 1987. I guess I had been in the business about 6 years or so at that point, and so that was kind of our flagship. It was really, kind of like my dad was actually older than my children. 30. We were around 32 years. We're here at 33 now. But we served our last meal in March, not knowing it was going to be the last meal we would ever serve. But as I kind of took a look around, it was obvious that business model really wasn't going to work going forward in the current environment. And I had been working on a Tex-Mex concept that I was going to do in a different location. And walking around, I mean, we were closed, the building was dark, and I was just kind of walking around one morning trying to figure out what I was going to do with the space. And I said, you know what, it makes no sense to go ahead and buy another piece of property, build and do. Why don't I just repurpose this space and we'll move the Tex-Mex here? What I had been working on had a large outdoor component. And so we just kind of took in part of the parking lot, which actually the construction is going on over there right now. Hope to be finished in about 5 or 6 weeks with this really, really cool patio area. And the response, we opened, I think it was like January 5th. I was hoping to open it September, and we finally made it January 5th, but the response has been phenomenal. It's going very well.
That's wonderful. And of course, now I guess with the vaccines coming online and more people are feeling comfortable to get back out and eating. And I got to tell you, I know that's probably one of the things I missed the most was in-person dining there for a while, because that is such an important part of a community, particularly an independent restaurant.
Yeah. Independent restaurants, I mean, you said it, Marshall, independent restaurants kind of make up the character of a town. I mean, they are that kind of the conduit from, say, the community organizations and just the public. I know when I'm traveling, I go to the front desk of a hotel and I go down front and I say, I want to go to the local independently owned breakfast place. I want to go to that place where the men are talking sports and politics, and they usually steer me to one, because that's where I'm going to learn about whatever town I'm in or whatever city I'm in. It's not the franchise chain restaurant, on the interstate Cloverleaf there that's going to be exactly like the franchise chain restaurant at the next interstate overpass and the next one. It doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. It tells me nothing about that town or its people, but it's the local independently owned places, especially the little community cafes, where you can really learn about a community.
We lost a lot of them though this year, didn't we?
Yeah, it wasn't quite as bad as in Hattiesburg. It was pretty brutal. A couple of dozen, I would say, restaurants, but every one of them were independent, locally owned restaurants. We have no chain that I can think of closed down as a result. Though it was pretty dire. This time last year, I guess we're at April 13th. This time last year, the predictions were 85% of all independent restaurants would end up closing to this pandemic. And so, we've come out or seemingly gotten close to the other end of this thing we lost, I think at one point we were at 2.5 million jobs down across the country just from restaurants and independent restaurants. And, so there's a lot of people out of work and a lot of people aren't back yet, but we're working on it.
Well, and that's hard too. I mean, for you as a restaurateur, as an owner, and for you to have a staff that you have trained and that are good and everything else, and then suddenly they're cast out into the wind. And I can understand why you were doing the unemployment thing, because you wanted to make sure you could get them back in-house so you didn't have to train a whole new group of folks to be able to start starting over.
Yeah. You're right about that. And especially management. Everybody want to make sure we have some people that have been with us for 32, since like the day we opened 33 years ago, and they've been with us since day one. So we have a lot of long-term employees. So we have a lot of loyalty to them. They've taken care of us over the years. We want to make sure we take care of them. But the textbooks will say location, 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 but it's really management.
Yeah.
And opening a restaurant from scratch is one of the hardest, most stressful things you'll ever do. and I was sitting there faced with the possibility: are we going to open 6 restaurants from scratch all at one? How do you do that?
Yeah.
It takes about 4 months out of your life and probably about 10 years off of your life just opening one. And so faced with that's where all this white comes from.
Well, I was going to say, I saw the
Yeah.
picture you posted on Facebook of you and Jill looking like you're
Yeah.
about 900 years old, saying, yeah, this year hasn't aged us at all.
Yeah, you feel like that sometimes, but yeah, so we were scrambling to make sure everybody was taken care of.
Yeah.
Everybody was healthy, and we came out on the other end, and when we started reopening all the concepts, we reopened with everybody we kind of left with. So everybody's healthy. We didn't lose anybody, and we feel good about that. Makes us happy.
I have to admit, one of my guilty pleasures is watching like the restaurant rescue shows on like the Food Network and stuff. And I think after about 4 episodes of watching those, I realized that's got to be what you do is one of the hardest jobs on the planet. What is the average lifespan of a restaurant usually?
I think 95%, this is a statistic I've heard in the past, 95% of independents that open are closed within 5 years.
Okay. So and you've managed to do one for 32 years. So
yeah, well, I've closed some too. Over the years I've opened and closed a lot, but we, we're hanging in there, and I'm doing what I love to do. There's nothing I would rather do. I was talking to my son one day several years ago, and he said, "Dad, what do you think I ought to do when I grow up?" And I said, son, whatever it is, don't make it about the money. Just find what you love to do and see and see if you can get paid for it. And then I said these words, and it was the first time as they were coming out of my mouth, the realization hit me. I'd never thought about it before, but I said, son, here's the deal. Ever since I've owned that restaurant, and at the time it was probably 29, 30 years, I said, for the last 30 years, I've never once gotten up in the morning, not once have I gotten up and gone, oh, I got to go to work. I never had. And as I said it, I went, oh man, that's true. I never really had. And I said, that's what I want for you. So whatever and it turns out he wants to get in the restaurant business. So there's nothing I pushed, but I feel blessed. It's really not work for me. It's what I do. It's my hobby. I turkey hunt a little bit. I'm a terrible turkey hunter, so the turkeys are safe.
Nobody's a good turkey hunter, Robert.
Yeah, I fish about once a year. I don't play golf.
Yeah.
Restaurants are my life. I love it. That's my hobby. When we travel, that's what we do. And so I'm kind of blessed to do my hobby for a living. And really what I should have done is looked at this camera, because I feel like my desk is I should have cleaned off my desk before we started this interview. It's a little messy over there. We got too many projects going on.
That's that, and we'll touch on those projects, because I think, where a lot of people, when the pandemic hit, they kind of got into the fetal position. It's like number one, you pivoted, which to your credit, you figured out, okay, this is what I got to do to be able to keep alive. This is what I got to do. Okay, we're going to put food in styrofoam containers and sell them that way, and do whatever we need to do to survive. But you also, like you said, you started, El Rayo, you got that going. That's going to be successful. You're now, and you've tried to get outside of Hattiesburg before, and with mixed success, but you're taking Ed's to Jackson and doing some other development up there. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm really excited, to have Ed's a little bit closer, because I really love Ed's, but also too, I think that development that you're part of is really gonna make Fondren pop.
Yeah, there was no time to crawl up in the fetal position, like you say, man. We just, we got to work, and not only, like I said, took care of our folks, but we started something we called a Healthcare Heroes, and we're shipping food to the hospital, the ICU unit, and all those COVID units every day. I look at my memories feature now. It was about this time last year. It was me. I was driving to the hospital. I pick up from Tabella, and we bring them lasagna dinners and stuff like that. So we just, you do what you got to do to take care of the community and stuff. This project you're referring to in Jackson is a project in Fondren, which I've always thought is the coolest neighborhood in the biggest city in the state. And I get approached a good bit, 2 or 3 times a year, typically, with somebody who wants us to open a restaurant here in this town or at this place. And early on in my career, it was probably an ego trip for me. And I thought, oh, they want us here and they want us to, and really typically it's usually somebody who wants you to bail them out of a bad real estate decision or something, and so I became a little jaded over the years when people would call with the perfect situation. You need to open a restaurant here. But when I got a call from Jason Watkins and David Farr up in Jackson about this Fondren project, it was something not only about the project, which I was really interested in, but it was about them and their passion for Fondren and for the neighborhood and staying true to the neighborhood and maintaining the vibe and the character of that neighborhood. And that's really what attracted me to come up there and be a part of that. Because, we look at a lot of offers, but those guys, their aim was true. Mm-hmm. And so we're in the middle of that. We're actually getting started right when COVID hit. So it put us back really about a year. And we're just now getting this thing cranked back up. And it's an exciting project. The Capri Theater, right there on North State Street, which is an historic old theater from the early 30s. And we're doing a historic renovation on the outside of that, but inside we're doing a modernization. We're bringing in reclining seats and full bar appetizers and things like that. Jackson doesn't have a movie screen. The capital city in the state of Mississippi doesn't have one. There are some suburbs around, 2 or 3 around, but there's not one in the city proper. This will be we're going to run first run movies and classics. Next to that, we're doing a restaurant and bar that's similar to our Crescent City Grill here in Hattiesburg, but also a 10-lane bowling alley in there, which is going to be really fun. And then a tiki bar. And to the right of the Capri, where the old Texaco station was, is where we're bringing the Ed's Burger joint that you were referring to. And it's going to have a rooftop bar. It's going to be really, really cool. So we're excited to come to Jack. Ed's Burger joint here has been open, I guess, about 5 years. And always our biggest fans, of the people who come in that restaurant, who are the biggest fans, are typically from the Jackson area. They're down on their way to Florida, or they're here for a soccer tournament or something. And so we're excited to bring that up to Jackson. And I'm just excited to be a part of this thing and looking forward to it. We should fall of 2021. We'll do it in 3 stages. The restaurant, bar, tiki bar, bowling alley will open first. Yeah. Then the theater will open second. Then the Eds.
That theater's really cool. We had a TEDx event there a few years ago, and they put grass all in the inside of it and had chairs and everything else. But you're right about David and Jason. They're really both. Yeah. They had a really great idea for that, and I'm glad to see it starting to come to fruition, because I think it's going to be a really nice little jewel in the middle of Fondren.
I agree. Yeah. And we're fortunate that we're kind of, and I realize this, that we're coming in on third base a little bit. Guys like Derek Emerson and Jeff Good and Bill Latham, all these restaurateurs that came before us, the guys at Pig and Pint, they came in there when it wasn't as easy as at the beginning of that Fondren Renaissance, and really established this thing. And we're grateful, and we plan on being a good neighbor and good partners in Fondren, and look forward to the work and appreciate being able to kind of come in on third base there.
Well, you're up at Jackson a lot anyway, because you've served on so many boards throughout the years. You've been with the Mississippi Arts Commission for many years. You're doing it with the Book Festival now. So you know Highway 49 pretty well.
I do. Jackson's always been kind of a second home. I lived there a couple of times over the years, and still, whether it's Special Olympics Board or the Alzheimer's Board, or the Book Festival. Book Festival we usually do on Zoom, so that doesn't get me up there much. But yeah.
I have to admit, Zoom is kind of good for that reason, if no other reason.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, a board meeting going to take you out for a day.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I can come here in my office, usually with my desk a little cleaner, I'm sorry. And and I
Robert,
can
that's
just
my
meet here,
kitchen
and then
behind me. It's okay.
yeah.
That's
Are you in
the
the
whole point
kitchen?
of Zoom is giving people lots of cool things to look at behind you.
Are
So
you in the kitchen?
yeah, we're in the kitchen.
Oh,
So
nice, nice. I feel at home when you're
yeah,
talking.
here I'll kind of give you the grand tour there. There's
Nice,
the oven and refrigerator. So there you go. But
sweet,
got a nice
sweet.
view out looking out the window. So it works out pretty good. But
I've been in this office for, I don't know, 25, 26 years. I don't have a window, but
are you still across the way in that
yeah.
little strip center? Yeah, yeah. Now, to say back in, when did we do the book? Was it 2005? I was trying to think.
I think it was four, maybe.
Four,
It was before Katrina. It was a year before Katrina, because I had a book that was released. Katrina hit what on Monday, and I had a book that was released that Tuesday that nobody ever knew about. And
No, I know. I had some.
with the
Yeah, I had some
hurricane.
children's books that I'd illustrated were in Chick-fil-A the week of Katrina.
Yeah.
So nobody knew that they were even in there. I was like, on that. But that said, I think we were down on a book tour on the coast during, yeah, there it is. Nobody's Poet.
Shameless plug.
God,
I thought I had one laying around.
yeah,
So-
you didn't like how I drew you then, but you do look a little bit different now, I will say.
Yeah. So just for the people watching this thing, I do a food column, and I had been writing it several years, and people had requested that I put together kind of an anthology of those things, and my first thought was it'd be nice, other than somebody just reading stuff I had written, to have them illustrated. And I approached Marshall, and we had a blast. At least I did. I had a blast.
It was fun doing it. It really
Not only working, and so Marshall illustrated all those columns. That it was my writing was early writing for me, which was a lot different than what I write now. Now I'm not sure I quite found my voice yet, but you did those things justice. So the best part of that book are actually your illustrations, not really my writing or stories. But there's one interesting story. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but it was it was maybe a year or two after you and I released that book, and I was at those books usually happen around Christmas time. And I was at a book signing. I think it was Brookhaven. It was either Macomb or Brookhaven. And it was like my last one of the season. And it was probably the 21st or something of December. And the book signing had been early. You go for 2 hours, and probably the first 45 minutes were really busy. Everybody had waited. And then the last hour and 15 minutes, nobody was around, and it was slow, and it was getting dark. And I was ready to go home. It was my last signing. And someone called and said, a lady just called, and she's coming down. She's got to get you. She wants to tell you this story. And I was like, oh, I was kind of, it's like, oh, I didn't say anything, but inside I was going, I want to go home, but if this lady's driving, she lived 20 or 30 minutes away, and she was going to drive down. And so I waited, and I was trying to be polite, and I waited, and she got there, and it was about 10 or 15 minutes late. It was like 5:15. And she came in, and she said, I just want to tell you this story. She was holding the book, and you and I had signed the book. And she said, I just want to tell you this story. And I had to catch you. And she said, this friend of mine, and I don't remember his name, but she said he had cancer, and he had a long, hard battle towards the end. And the last 5 or 6 months of his life were pretty rough, and he was in bed most of the time, and I would go visit him, and I would read him stories from your book, and it was like the thing that would brighten his day. And it was like this. I mean, she went on and on and on, and inside I thought, oh, I feel so bad, man. I can't believe I almost left, and didn't hear this story. But I mean, she went on and on. It was one of the most special things, I've ever heard about that book. And so you obviously were a part of that. And then this guy, didn't make it. His prognosis was terminal, but to have heard that kind of that lifted him up in his final days or whatever was a nice thing to hear. And the exact opposite of the thing when the book first came out, and I was walking through the dining room of the restaurant, and some man held up the book and said, "I keep it on the back of my toilet. I read it on the toilet." So
that's good marketing right there,
yeah,
to make it
yeah.
sure it fits on the back of the toilet. Because
Right, that's the kind of stuff I hear typically, not the the cancer service story.
Well, I will tell you the four things I got out of the book. Number one, I love spending the time with you and working with you, and that was a lot of fun. And we did a trip, and it wasn't long before Katrina. We went down on the Gulf Coast and did book signings at Past Christian Books, and I mean but we went down and drove all around and looked around, and it was like, to me, it was the last time I got to see the coast pretty much before it got obliterated. And I've always been so grateful for that experience and getting to go do that. And I guess the third, and I probably miscounted because I'm not real good at math. That's why I draw pictures. But you pretty much showed me where every good local restaurant was. It was like, oh, let's go to Letha's, or let's stop at this gas station and get Mexican food, or let's go down. There was a Mexican restaurant right in Gulfport that was really good. And I was like, I feel like that my knowledge of restaurants in Mississippi was born that trip, whenever we would go do the book signing. So that was an awful lot of fun. Oh, and the fourth thing is I got to be able to sign Wyatt Waters' name really well. Because I was like the second Darren on Bewitched, and so people would come and sign and have one of Wyatt's books. And I was like, okay,
Wyatt and I only had one book out at the time. We had only done one book, and really from the time we talked, had never really even discussed doing another book. I mean, we were good friends, and we were still kind of promoting that first book, but I had gone on and done Deep South Staples, and he did Oxford Sketchbook, and then he did a project with the Junior League he illustrated, and then you and I worked on together. I think the next book was something Southern Seasons he and I did. But I remember that trip. I remember you and I being in Bay St. Louis at a signing down there, and I was just there this past weekend and was thinking to myself, it's funny you bring this up, because I was thinking, Bay St. Louis, Mississippi is a true Katrina success story. It's back better than it was. I mean, we were there. They have something called Second Saturday, and I guess the second Saturday of every month. Man, the nightlife, it was just happening, man. All these people probably from Louisiana were there, and so you're bringing in out-of-state dollars. It was great. All the restaurants were full. The bars were. It was just, it felt normal again, and that little town has grown back better than it was before Katrina. So, but yeah, I remember that day. That was fun.
It really was. And that's the thing about Mississippi, and that I've come to love, is the whole Katrina story, which it was so hard. And I mean, there's so many difficult stories that you can talk about, but it's the whole chainsaws and casseroles thing. It was literally, if there's like a tornado or hurricane, there's usually a church van in your front yard with chainsaws and casseroles. They're going to feed you. And that's what we do. And that was definitely what went on down on the coast. But you're right, man. Bay St. Louis has got it going. It's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is.
You as a writer and doing the books, and it's funny, I learned a lot about producing books from you. And, I remember one time you were waiting for either there was a dock strike or something. You couldn't get the books off the ship, and you were like, Christmas is coming, and so forth. But that has been such an interesting part of what you do. Also, as well, I mean, like you were talking about Wyatt, you really developed a great friendship working with him. It's like you got a best friend out of the deal.
Oh, no doubt. He and I didn't know Wyatt before we did that first book, and just had this idea spurred on by a customer of the restaurants, and went up to his gallery one day. I said, I got an idea for a book based, on recipes I created, maybe some stories about the South, like were in my column, and his watercolors. And it was one of those things. I mean, we instantly hit it off. We probably talked about this book idea I had for 15 minutes and spent the next 2 hours talking about the Beatles. We just had a lot in common, and so we did that book, and it went it just blew up way beyond anybody's expectations, and had a blast, got to know each other, became good friends. We each did a couple of other projects, and we came back, did another book, and then another. And I had this long goal of when my kids turned 10 and 14 to take them to Europe. The original goal was 1 month out of the summer every year, we would go to a different European country and kind of spend and use it as a hub and travel around. And, the year prior, we work on learning the language, and, the kids would buy in. And that idea kind of just morphed into, what if we just did it all at once? Let's just go. And so I was able to do that. Sold a piece of land, and we hopped on a plane, and my daughter was 14, my son was 10, and my wife flew to Sweden, bought a Volvo, and like you said, spent the next 6 months in 17 countries and 72 cities. A few weeks after we landed, we were in Istanbul, Turkey. We were blowing and going. But the 10 weeks we were in Italy, Wyatt flew over, and so we worked on what was our third book at the time, called An Italian Palette. And it was one of the when I'm older one day and sitting in a rocking chair, kind of thinking back on all the great times of my life, certainly that whole 6-month period would be, probably the highlight. I'm not sure if I can ever top that, but the 10 weeks we worked on that book were pretty special too. We covered from the southernmost tip of Sicily to the Alps. We covered it, and I ate and he painted, and we came back, and from that 10-week span, a book came out of that, and out of a book came, we started leading tours over there. And so I've spent the last few years, I've spent a couple of months a year just leading people through all those places we discovered. And out of that came this TV show on MPB. And like you said, we were headed over to Spain to film season 6, March of 2020, when the pandemic hit. So all that's obviously changed too. But yeah, it's been one of the greatest experiences of my life working with that guy. He's so talented. He's just got a really kind, gentle spirit, and we've been through a lot together, a lot of difficult times on both ends, and come out on the other side. And I think both of us doing pretty good these days.
Yeah, it's makes you feel like the universe is going to be okay when you see Wyatt Waters in a good place, and I think he's in a good place right now.
Oh, he's in a great place. He's very happy. He's married. He's just content and couldn't be happier, and we're happy he's happy. And
folks may not know this about you. You talked about your mutual love of the Beatles, and which, by the way, I love it when Wyatt plays his guitar. That's just always a special moment. You have one of the best, and this is even back before streaming, you have one of the best music collections of any human being I've ever met. You truly are into music as much as you are food.
I'd say that's true. Those, if I had to, I said earlier, I don't really have any hobbies, but music is a hobby, and movies and football. Those are kind of my 3 extracurricular loves. And I'm not sure what order I would put those in. Depends on what's going on with my favorite team, during what time. But yeah, music has been, there's something about, I know everybody loves music, but there's something in me that just everything is associated with some type of song, whether it's from my youth or whether it's currently or my kids. And it's like food. It is a connector of people and relationships and situations. And it's one of those great things that God's given us that we can enjoy.
You talk about connectors, and I can't remember if it's 4 or 5, but the 4 Fs or the 5 Fs?
5. Yeah.
5. Thank you. I didn't know if the 5th was dirty or not, so I just had to.
Yeah. So those 5 Fs are faith, in order.
Yeah.
Faith, family, friends, food, and fun.
Yeah.
And the way I look at those is I had a pretty wild youth. And I was pretty wild child, black sheep kind of guy, and got clean and sober when I was 21 years old, but still really kind of looked for fun in a lot of the wrong places for a lot of my life until sometime around my late 30s, around the time probably time my kids were born. Things started kind of coming together, and instead of looking for fun in the wrong places, I kind of figured out how to prioritize things in my life. I mean, it took me a long time. I think most people figured that out way before I did. But and that's the priority. Is faith, and then family, and then friends, and then food. And a lot of people think, well, you're just looking for a way to squeeze food in, and it starts with an F. And that's just not true, because food is that, like you said, it's the connected. It brings us together. And I think, and I challenge people all the time. I said, think back to the best times in your life, the times you remember most, your good memories. And I bet food was somehow involved, whether you were having lunch at your grandmother's house after church, or you were with friends celebrating a birthday, or you were with your kids on vacation at some restaurant, your grandmother's, all of those things. Food is the thing. So faith, family, friends, food, and fun. And the thing about fun is, if you've got 3 or 4 of those other F's going on at once, then the fun just happens. And that's how those memories are created. So you don't have to look for fun. It's just, and I talk about all the time. I talk about Sunday lunch at my grandmother's house. I'm a 59-year-old man still talking about when I was 5, 6, 10 years old eating lunch. But you think about that, and it was after church. So faith, family was all around the table. Faith, family, friends were invited and showed up a lot of times. Food, you're doggone right. It was a lot of food there. It was really good food. And so the fun just happened. So, that it took me a long time to figure that out. But once I did, I started trying to put myself in situations, and my family in situations where you could bring all those together. And that's kind of what the trip to Europe, that long trip to Europe was about, or you and I on a book tour, sharing a meal and being with friends and family, all those kind of things.
That's why I always tell people, I said, if you remember from Sunday school, it seems like about every other lesson, there was a meal involved in there somewhere in the good books.
Right.
So definitely on that. Your mom, you and I both share one thing in common, is we both have moms that were art teachers.
Yeah.
How's your mom doing?
She's doing well. We moved her in the middle of this COVID crisis. We moved her from independent living into assisted living facility. She's doing well. Just spent the weekend with her on the coast at my brother's place, and we're all together down there. So she's kind of getting out, and that, I'm gonna tell you, that isolation during that period was really rough. I mean, some people aged 10 years in 10 months. I mean, for elderly people, isolation like that is not good at all. People need engagement. We need engagement, but the older you get, the more of that you really need, and isolation is not good. She's doing great. She was still teaching art lessons to people in the independent living facility as soon as, this time last year, she was still doing it. She's not anymore. She's got a little bit of a tremor, so she doesn't really paint anymore. But yeah, so I grew up, her mother was an artist, and her mother's mother was an artist. And, I've kind of been around art my whole life. And, we always went to museums and, art shows and arts and crafts fairs and things like that. It's always been a part of my life.
Well, she at least got to see you on television a lot, because there for a while, it seemed like you were on every television show on cable when trying to promote the restaurant rescue legislation on that. Tell us a little bit about that experience. And now, of course, that legislation got moved into the COVID relief bill. So it's done and it's there, and the money's there. How is that helping restaurants now? So,
it's a really crazy story. As with most things in my life, just kind of, I fall into these things. I don't know if I'm open to opportunity, or if I'm lucky, or if I'm just around, or fate happens, or whatever it is. But March 19th of last year, I got a text from a friend that said, hey, there's a group of restaurateurs and chefs from across the country that started meeting the day before on the 18th. trying to figure out what they can do to save the restaurant industry, you need to join. And so I got in on the Zoom call the next day. There were about maybe 20 of us on the call. And as I remember it, I think it was that first day, somebody said, if you know a senator or a representative, let us know. And I said, well, I know Senator Wicker from Mississippi. He's chairman of commerce. And it was like, and so it was one of these things. It was a lot of, kind of national people and national names. And I got to know them. And we met twice a day for the first 3 months, 7 days a week. And then it was every day for a long time. And Senator Wicker ended up authoring the restaurant relief bill in the Senate. A congressman from Portland, Earl Blumenauer, the representative, introduced the House version, and Senator Wicker introduced the Senate version. And it just passed in this, as you say, in that bill. We got it in the last session. It passed the House. We had 52 senators on board, from both sides of the aisle. I mean, you had Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin on one side, and you had John Cornyn and Lindsey Graham on the other side. It was a truly bipartisan effort, but the election kind of got in the way, and November came up, and we couldn't quite push it over the finish line. But this new Congress, we worked to get, and it's really, even though Senator Wicker voted against the 1.9 trillion package, word for word, the legislation he wrote was put into this bill. So what passed for restaurant relief was the bill that we worked on from last year. And so, we're in the process right now in the Independent Restaurant Coalition of working with the Small Business Administration to see how this will be administered. It's much smaller amount than what we were asking for last year, but it's $28.6 billion. It's a lot, and it'll go fast. So what we're doing, we worded the legislation to where that $5 billion of that will go to restaurants that do under $500,000 a year. So the mom and pop, really just true small corner cafes, also restaurants that are owned by people of color, women-owned restaurants, and restaurants in underserved communities will get first shot at that money, and to make sure it doesn't get gobbled up but it's all independent restaurants. It's
so no chains are going to be able to.
Well, if you are a franchisee of less than 20, and so like I know a local guy here that owns like 5 Popeyes. I mean, he's an independent restaurant guy. Okay. None of that can go to corporate headquarters or publicly traded companies or anything like that.
Money's going to help people that need it the most.
Yeah, it's a true independent restaurant bill, and it was really pushed through by the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which is we're still meeting and working on getting this thing written and making sure we're getting the word out. Yeah, that's our big goal now, is getting the word out to all these restaurants, and we're having it put in 5 different languages so people will know how to access the funds. And
yeah, that's the tough part, because when you're an independent, a small business owner, independent restaurateur, it's like you don't have a corporate staff that can help you get through the accounting and the business work. You're just sitting here trying to go through the forms and figure that out. So that's good to hear on that. Yeah. Robert, I know your schedule's insane. I'd love to talk to you for 5 more hours, to be honest with you, because we got a lot of catching up to do. But before we go, is there any thoughts? Just thoughts about Mississippi, where we're at, or where you think you're going with your businesses or so forth? Kind of big open question.
I feel about Mississippi like Texans feel about Texas. I've got a lot of pride in this state, and I feel really blessed. And the more time I spend in Europe, the more I appreciate home. And to us, I think sometimes we can't see the forest for the pine trees, and we kind of buy into and maybe believe some of the stereotypical things, and don't understand that there's so many scars that we have, and so many sins of our fathers that we have overcome to where we are today, that we sometimes tend to look down on ourselves a little bit and kind of believe this stereotypical version of Mississippi from however many years ago.
Yeah.
But when you talk to Europeans, we live in an exotic land. I mean, Mississippi to them, it's so great to hear. It's like we live in this exotic land where the blues were invented. My watch is talking to me. I don't know what's going on here, but it's where the blues were invented, and they know Elvis Presley, and it's where rock and roll came from, and it's where country music came from. And I was a little cynical about all those things and a little skeptical. And birthplace of America's music, I get it. It's a nice moniker and it's good for the PR or whatever. But it wasn't until I started talking to people over there that I realized, I was born and raised in the state that gave all of these great gifts to the world, not only literary and artistic, but all of this great music. And I was born in a hospital that is on Highway 49. And if you follow Highway 49 straight up into the Delta, it crosses, Highway 61. And that's where the blues were invented, man. So, we are so much more than these things that happened in our past that you and I had nothing to do with. And so Morgan Freeman said it best. Somebody asked him in an interview one time, they said, you could live anywhere in the world, Mr. Freeman. Why do you live in Mississippi? And he said, I live in Mississippi because I could live anywhere in the world. And he followed it up later with, hell, I'd live here for the food alone. and so, who am I to argue with that? And, I feel really blessed to live and really also the part of the state I live in, to be an hour north of the Gulf of Mexico and that beautiful bounty of seafood, to be in my business and to be able to get fresh seafood deliveries once a day, the stuff that was swimming last night. Like you said, I could take the 4 hours talking to you about why I love Mississippi and the people. And again, that's more than anything, it's the people. Yeah. And there's something to be said for hospitality and being the hospitality state. It's one thing over the last year, I've been on this independent restaurant coalition and dealing with people from all over the country, New York, California, Chicago, all over. They recognize that and they understand that, that's what it's like down here. And it's just normal to us. This hospitality gene that we kind of walk around with it's second nature to us, but it's a little, at first it's a little disconcerting, I think, to people from around here because they think it's a little put on, but it really is it's just how we are.
Robert, thank you so much. And thank you for all you do. I mean, I'm glad you're a Mississippian, and I agree with you 100%. I'm not a Mississippian by birth, but I'm one by choice, and I'll be here 25 years this year. And it's one thing I have to admit, of all the places I've lived, the food here is definitely, it's better than about every place. I mean, I've lived in San Diego and Houston, Texas, and Atlanta, and there's great restaurants and everything, but per capita, we are so blessed to have great food. And of course, you're a big part of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Marshall, and thanks for what you do. You are a Mississippian. 25 years. You were a Mississippian 25 days in, and we're claiming you whether you want it or not.
No. I'm very, very proud. My boys are all Mississippian by birth, so that's what matters. But anyway, will you take care, and look forward to talking to you soon. And I can't wait to eat at Ed's when it gets opened up here. That'll be great.
Man.
Good deal.
Take care.
Take care, Robert.